Have you seen the Norwex raw chicken demo? It's pretty dramatic how it shows that a Norwex cloth can clean better than a Clorox wipe. I've seen it before, but it's left me with a lot of questions. It really kind of feels like a magic trick or something. So I spent some time investigating what is really going on with the Norwex raw chicken demo. Hi, I'm Cindy from Smart Family Money. I help you learn how to shop smarter, save money, and save time so you can get back to changing the world. Okay, so you've probably seen the Norwex raw chicken demo, but I'll give you a quick rundown of what it's usually like. Usually, the Norwex consultant talks a little bit about how the Norwex cloth and a Clorox wipe are different types of cleaning, that the Clorox wipe is chemical cleaning and the Norwex cloth is physical cleaning. And then she'll usually go through and dramatically read the directions on the Clorox wipe and talk about how it suggests you use gloves, and it also talks about how you should leave the disinfecting solution on the surface for 10 minutes to thoroughly clean. And then she'll go into how no one does that properly. Nobody uses these wipes properly. Do you actually leave them on there for 10 minutes? And then she'll go into talking about how you properly use the Norwex cloth, that you got to get it wet and fold it up and then try to use it flat on the surface so that you're getting as much contact of the microfiber with the surface because you're physically cleaning and pulling things off of the surface. Next up, she'll show you the tests that she's going to use to check for clean or dirty. They're the Pro Clean tests made by Hygiena is what they're called. And they are green if it's clean and purple if it's dirty. And she'll talk about how they test for protein, and protein is smaller than bacteria. So if there's no protein on the surface, there's also no bacteria, and bacteria need protein to grow. And so that's why using a protein test is a valid test for cleanliness. I did a demonstration of how the Norwex test usually goes, and I'm going to show you the footage, but basically the process is wipe the raw chicken on the counter, test and show that it is dirty, and then wipe one side with the Norwex cloth and the other side with the Clorox wipe, and then test them both, and she'll show you that the Norwex one comes out clean and the Clorox one comes out dirty. I'll show you some footage of my version of it so you can check it out. So first up, I wipe the counter with the raw chicken to make it as gross as possible. Then I use the protein stick to test and make sure that it's dirty. It's purple, definitely dirty. Then I wiped really well with the Norwex cloth using both sides. Wiped the other side with the disinfecting wipe. Then I tested both sides with the protein sticks. Give it a good shake. Here's the results. Ta-da! Norwex is clean, disinfecting wipe is dirty. As you saw in the footage, mine followed exactly the same script as the consultant's. The Norwex side came out clean, the Clorox wipe came out dirty. At this point, the Norwex consultant will explain to you how, because their Norwex cloth did so much better than the disinfecting wipes, you should buy their cloth. And this is usually where the sales pitch comes in. All right, so that's how the demo goes. But doesn't this leave you with a lot of questions? I know I had a lot of questions when I saw this. So I'm going to go through all of my questions and tell you the research and what I found out about each of these things. And I'm sure you're not surprised to find out that there is deception involved in this test. They're hiding the truth in some ways with how they're doing this demonstration. So I'm going to go through my 6 big questions that I had about these and tell you what the truth really is. So what are these tests really? They are a quick and easy test that are meant to be used in food service. They're meant to be a way that maybe the manager of the kitchen can quickly test if the workers in the kitchen are cleaning up properly in the kitchen. They are sensitive to 80 micrograms of protein after 1 minute and 20 micrograms of protein after 10 minutes. So what does that really mean though? That sounds really small. 20 micrograms sounds really tiny. But when I looked at what that's equivalent to, 20 micrograms is equivalent to approximately 1 million bacteria or 10 million viruses or 100 million protein particles. That's a lot of stuff that can still be on the surface, and it will test clean even after 10 minutes with this stick. So basically this test stick will test to make sure things aren't like horribly dirty. but they're not really testing if it's truly clean or anywhere near sterile. It can have a whole lot of bacteria, protein, all kinds of things on the surface and still test clean with the stick. Another question I had was, does this test tell us anything about viruses? Or even, do these cloths pick up viruses? Because I've noticed that Norwex and eCloth and all the companies pretty much never mention viruses. They only ever talk about bacteria. So why is that? I think the reason that they never talk about viruses is because testing for viruses is much more difficult than testing for bacteria. You can test for bacteria by just putting the material in a petri dish and letting it grow, and bacteria will grow in a dish. Viruses can only grow on living surfaces, so it's extremely difficult to actually test if there's live viruses on a surface. It's very expensive and not something you can just easily do at home or in a lab. And if you notice things like disinfecting wipes, sometimes they will say kill viruses, but then it'll specify which kinds of viruses it kills. Another thing to be aware of when we're talking about like the chemical cleaning versus physical cleaning that the consultants talk about is there's also kind of a difference between cleaning and disinfecting. Disinfecting means killing the bacteria or viruses. And the only things that can kill bacteria and viruses are chemicals. That's kind of the point of things like disinfecting wipes. A Norwex cloth or other kind of cloth can pick up viruses and bacteria possibly, but it can't actually kill them. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about whether this makes sense in your home. The next question I had when I was watching these demonstrations was, why are they using a Clorox wipe to compare to the Norwex when they themselves are talking about these are two totally different things, chemical cleaning versus physical cleaning? Why are they not comparing the Norwex cloth to even something like a dishcloth, something that is more comparable, something that you might be using in your house, or a rag or something like that? So I did some testing to check out how does the Norwex cloth compare to other things in the household. Here's a quick rundown of the testing that I did comparing these. So just like last time, the first step is to get everything really dirty with the raw chicken. Rub it around, gross as possible is best. Then we use the test stick to make sure that things really are dirty. Yep, purple, definitely dirty. All right, so then I wipe with the different cloths. First up is the Norwex, next disinfecting wipe, followed by a wet paper towel. It's just a Kirkland brand paper towel. And then that one is 100% cotton washcloth. And the last one there is Swedish dishcloth. I love my Swedish dishcloths and I have a whole video about those. I'll give you a link to that. All right, now we test all the surfaces to see which ones are clean, which ones are dirty. Gotta give each one a good shake. Now this cotton washcloth, I picked it because it was nice and fluffy and thick, and I wondered if that would make a difference in the test. I repeated this test a couple different times and the results were pretty similar every time. I waited 10 minutes because the test is more sensitive after 10 minutes than it is right away, and I wanted to get it as good as possible. Look at that! Norwex cloth and the cotton washcloth both came out nice and clean. I was very surprised that the results showed that the washcloth, the cotton washcloth, actually passed. It got a green result, even though this is 100% cotton basic washcloth, but it is thick and fluffy. The Swedish dishcloth came out kind of slightly negative, but almost clean. I actually had done a couple different tests with the Swedish dishcloth, and one came out clean and one came out slightly dirty. The paper towel did not come out clean, not terribly surprising. And of course, the Clorox wipe also did not come out clean. And the Norwex cloth did pass. But it was surprising to me that things like a basic cotton washcloth did just as well on this test as the Norwex cloth. Okay, so my next question was, what happens if you use a Clorox wipe properly, actually according to the instructions? The consultants talk about how nobody uses them properly, but okay, some people use them properly. And if you're comparing the physical cleaning properties of the Norwex cloth to the physical cleaning properties of a Clorox wipe, that's not a fair comparison because a Clorox wipe is very thin and really doesn't do much to pick up things off the surface. And that's what you're testing if you're just wiping immediately and testing them immediately. And of course, the Clorox wipe is going to fail on that. But I had the question of, what if you wait 10 minutes? Then what? Well, I ran that test, and you can check out the footage. This is right after that last test, but the disinfecting solution sat for 10 minutes and it was allowed to dry. Testing again to see if it's clean or dirty. I'm going to give the test stick 10 minutes to sit so it's as accurate as possible. And look at that. And the results were, after 10 minutes, it is clean. The area with the Clorox wipe does test clean after 10 minutes. It tests dirty immediately, but after 10 minutes, it tests clean. So I think this is an area where they're being very deceptive with this test because they're testing an unfair comparison and then they're not even using that product properly. I'd like to point out too that when you let the disinfecting wipe sit for 10 minutes, you let that solution sit for 10 minutes, you are actually killing the bacteria and viruses on the surface. So there is some benefit to using something like a disinfecting wipe as opposed to a microfiber cloth. The other thing I wanted to point out from the consultant's discussion of this is they talk about how no one uses the disinfecting wipes correctly because the instructions say to wipe things down and then let it sit for 10 minutes with the solution on there. Well, the only way you could really do it wrong is if you wiped the solution on there and then you wiped the solution off, like dried it with a cloth or something. As long as you leave the wet solution on there and you let it naturally dry, you're doing it right. Like you can wipe it down and then as a busy mom, most of the time, aren't you wiping it down and then walking away and doing something else? If that's what you're doing, you're using it correctly. And it is actually killing bacteria and viruses. So I think their claim that most people are using them wrong is maybe not right. The next obvious question that I had about this test, and I think a lot of people have, is, okay, great. So Norwex can pass this test, but how does it do compared to other microfiber cloths? Isn't that the most fair comparison? In the footage, you'll see I compared all 5 of these microfiber cloths to compare how they did with the test. I showed that it was dirty first, and then I wiped with all of them, and then we'll check out the results. Check out the footage. All right, this one starts just like the other ones. Rub that raw chicken all over the place, get it as dirty and gross as possible. Then I used one of the protein test sticks to make sure that it's dirty. And it's purple, so it's definitely dirty. Then I wiped with each cloth. I got the Norwex, followed by E-Cloth, Scotch-Brite, Rag Company, and the Dollar Tree. I'm gonna wipe each one to make sure, check if it's clean or dirty. Now, E-Cloth, I have a whole video comparing Norwex to E-Cloth, so I'll give you a link to that one. Scotch-Brite, I found this one at Target. They seem to be available pretty much anywhere. The Rag Company I found on Amazon. They're really popular with car detailers. Dollar Tree cloth I got at the Dollar Tree, and it was only $1 for one cloth, which was the least expensive of the options. I looked at them immediately, and they all look pretty green right away, but I'm going to give it 10 minutes just to make sure, get them as accurate as possible. Wow, and even after 10 minutes, they're still all green. I was really surprised by the results of this test, but as you can see, every single microfiber cloth passed this test, including the super cheap Dollar Tree cloth. I think that what this shows is, yes, Norwex is a good quality cloth, but this test is not very sensitive and lots of things can pass this cleanliness test. So it's not really proving that the Norwex cloth is any better than any other kind of similar cloth. As you saw earlier, even my basic cotton washcloth passed this test. So this test does not show that the Norwex cloths are anything special. The next question I had, and I think a lot of people have, is what if you wipe up that raw chicken with a microfiber cloth and then you wipe something else? Are you going to transfer that bacteria and protein and all that stuff to the other part of the counter or whatever you're wiping? So I wanted to test that to see what would happen. So I used all the microfiber cloths straight down, and then I backed up to another part of the counter that was clean, did not have any chicken on it, and I wiped again on that part of the counter. Then I retested the cleanliness of the back part of the counter, the part that was originally clean, and then wiped with a dirty cloth, and check out the results. You can see what happened. Now this is just following the last test. These cloths are all dirty with the raw chicken juice, and I had left them sitting on the clean part of the counter, and I rubbed it into that clean part to see if it transfers that dirty chicken juice to the clean part of the counter. This is something that Norwex consultants frequently talk about in their test. whether it transfers the dirty material or not. I'm going to test each one, and then I'm going to let it sit for 10 minutes so we get as accurate a result as possible. I checked them after 10 minutes. Look at that, they're all green. They did not transfer any dirty material. As you can see in the footage, even with wiping the dirty cloths on a clean part of the counter, it actually did not transfer the protein, or at least not enough to show up on this test. I was pretty impressed that all the cloths actually did not transfer the protein to another area on the counter. So what does all of this tell us about the Norwex chicken demo? I think it tells us it is kind of a magic trick. It really is kind of deceptive. Here are some of the reasons why. One, the Clorox wipes are really not a fair comparison to the Norwex cloth because they're different things. It's the physical cleaning versus the chemical cleaning. And if you're going to compare those two things, you should compare them fairly and use the Clorox wipe properly. And when the Clorox wipe is used properly, it passes. And I think if you're using those in your home, you probably are using them correctly, even though the consultants claim that you're not. The next thing I would say is lots of things can pass this test that aren't microfiber. I mean, my basic cotton washcloth passed the test. And then when you look at microfiber, all of the microfiber passed. Even the most cheap Dollar Tree microfiber passed this test. So it's not showing that Norwex is better than other microfiber cloths. The test is not that sensitive. When it tests clean, there can still be 1 million bacteria or 10 million viruses on the surface. And really, if you're concerned about killing bacteria or viruses, you should be disinfecting with a chemical like a Clorox wipe. You don't need to do that everywhere in your home, but for sensitive areas like food prep areas and bathrooms, it's not a bad idea to actually disinfect and kill those bacteria and viruses. A Norwex cloth does do a good job of removing things from the surface, but it does not actually kill bacteria and viruses. No physical cloth can. So what does this all make me feel about the Norwex cloths? Well, I have a Norwex cloth and I love it. It's great. But my main complaint is it's highly overpriced for what it is. A Norwex cloth costs around $19 for one cloth. An e-cloth, which I think is very comparable, costs around $4 or $5. The Scotch-Brite cloth that I tested costs about $3. And then I tested the Rag Company cloth. It costs around $1.50 if you buy them in a big pack. And then there's the Dollar Tree ones that only cost $1. Now, I do prefer the higher quality microfiber cloths. I do think they do a better job at just removing dirt and removing things off of surfaces. I've tried them all and I do really prefer the higher quality ones. But I'm going to choose e-cloth over Norwex because it's basically the same thing for less than a quarter of the price. So why wouldn't I choose that? But it doesn't mean that I think Norwex is bad. I think they're great, actually. I just think they're way overpriced. I hope you found this video helpful. If you liked it, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.